Hello everyone, this is Fionapollo. Today's topic is something that I've been dwelling on for some time but was never fully sure how best to go about it. The nature of this discussion is so broad and has such a relevant and serious message behind it that A, I felt it required sufficient time to be given the appropriate level of sensitivity and care when being approached, and B, unfortunately, the times at which these discussions are more widely taken on board by the general population is when an incident of specific significance occurs. So I will own up to the fact that when it comes to some of my more serious topics, you have to wait for the opportune moment to post them in order for them to have the greatest chance of reaching and resonating with as many people as possible in order to spread the message. With these conditions in mind, my role as a commentator feels like a precarious one. I personally try to use my platform as a way of spreading awareness and opening up conversations about things I care a lot about, and sometimes these can range from pretty serious right down to things that don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. However, the monetary aspect can also put the actual integrity of this into question as well. And in addition to that, even with the monetary aspect removed, it's not uncommon for people such as commentators to also become perpetrators of a cycle that feeds into the issues we talk about. Even though I feel that some of those situations are in some way inevitable, I want there to be no mistake that despite that being the case, there is a personal investment that goes into what I say in this video in particular. Anyone, regardless of audience size, social relevance, or cultural impact, who has willingly shared something of themselves with the world will no doubt be familiar with the risk involved regarding how other individuals choose to interpret and interact with not only what you put out there, but also with yourself as a person. And that risk is there whether you have virtually no platform at all, right up to being somewhat of a global sensation, such as the person who will be the focus of my discussion today. A statement has recently been put out by the up-and-coming pop music artist Chappel Roan after a series of incidents involving supposed fans of her music and artistic vision. Chappel has risen to fame very, very quickly, and with this comes the challenge of engaging with a very large, very sudden group of people and tempering their expectations, as well as trying to find a balance between multiple large-scale opportunities that have the capacity to alter your personal trajectory, which in this instance can include things like setting boundaries and choosing to prioritize certain public appearances. And this appears to be where things have begun to spiral in terms of what fans feel they are entitled to, and has subsequently called into question just how much one person should be expected to give and what the personal cost of that might be. And for those reasons, today I want to discuss not only the current goings-on surrounding Chappel and her career, but also the nature of parasocial relationships, the way in which people perceive, approach, and discuss those in the public sphere, and the potential risk factors this has. I'll be looking through examples of this phenomenon that will range from benign all the way to the worst case scenario, so please exercise caution if you choose to continue listening. And above all else, I want this video and the things I say to give people pause to seriously consider how they view others who can sometimes, due to the nature of things like fame or the barrier of a computer screen, appear less and less like people over time and more of a conglomerate or symbol that represents something else, as this can unfortunately deform the way in which we interact with them. But those faces and personalities are still people who are just as likely to experience the same things as you in their day-to-day lives. If they weren't, then we wouldn't have so much personal investment in the first place, which I think is the main point which is being lost here. These worries and risks that I'll be getting into aren't just things that people like celebrities have to worry about. Even creators of my size and even smaller, and people who don't even have platforms, need to take a moment to both evaluate what they are able and willing to give, as well as navigate what the effects of doing so might have in a way that comes across in a manner that others will actually respect. So please join me as I delve into this topic, give my thoughts, and allow you the space in the comments and beyond to formulate your own opinions on the topic at large. Please note that a lot of what I say in my videos is purely speculative and not based in fact, unless evidence is given to state otherwise. I will be trying to back a couple of things up with statistics and articles where I can, but my personal opinion of things is also a big factor of what I choose to talk about here. If you agree or like what I say, then please consider liking or subscribing. And if you happen to disagree with anything I say or have something to add, then I implore you to leave a comment, as constructive feedback is always appreciated here. Do you know of any prominent or personal examples of this phenomenon? Is it ongoing? What do you think the short or long-term effects might be? Please let me know. And without further ado, let's begin. So, to catch everyone up to speed, let's just do a quick recap of what's actually going on, and more importantly, who is this Chappel Roan character? Chappel Roan is a singer/songwriter who has actually been creating music since about 2014, but in September last year, with the release of her debut album, The Rise and Fall of the Midwestern Princess, she has become somewhat of an overnight sensation. While the album initially came on the scene with some success, by early 2024 it was regarded as a sleeper hit, and now it feels like the only other artist who has more buzz than Chappell in the public eye right now is Taylor Swift, who I am decidedly not going to give my opinion on. This was also largely helped by Chappell opening up for Olivia Rodrigo on her Guts World Tour, and performing at a lot of high-profile music festivals such as Coachella. Throw in a couple of viral TikToks using her songs and all of a sudden, Chappell's name was on everyone's lips. And the fact that it was so sudden after 10 years of flying under the radar wasn't lost on her or her team. Chappell, for the most part, has been a very open person in relation to her feelings about this sudden rise to fame, and it's this openness and vulnerability, among other things, that has endeared her to so many people. Not only that, but there is a significant portion of her fan base who feel a specific level of kinship for various reasons outside of just the fact that her music is good, which it is. She has a fantastic set of lungs and actually knows how to bridge her songs, and it frankly saddens me that this is an exception now. But a big thing for a lot of people, and this includes myself, is that she's one of the most notable current pop artists to be openly lesbian, which has endeared her to the wider LGBTQ community. And she isn't shy about this fact. She is loud and proud of her orientation, and in fact, her stage persona, Chappell Roan, has been referred to as her drag persona. And as well as that, she also doesn't tone that pride down when performing in certain areas where acceptance or even safety isn't guaranteed. She's performed in parts of the US that are considered more conservative and less safe for queer people, including her home state of Missouri. And this has been viewed as a form of solidarity with queer people in those states who may be less inclined to live as they might want to for safety reasons. So, safe to say, a lot of things in early 2024 ended up pulling together and allowing her to skyrocket into the eye of the celebrity storm. But with that comes a few teething pains that there really wasn't any way to prepare for. For one thing, because this is such a sudden swell in her notoriety and the fact that she is with an indie label, her team was and is still operating as if she is a smaller scale performer than she currently is. And that's not really something that could be helped right away. Even teams of people need time to adjust to a sudden and huge influx of recognition, and even then, it will be overwhelming for a while before things start to level out. And because she's obviously the focal point of it all, Chappell is the one to experience that influx firsthand because it is entirely directed at her. She's gone on record to even break down during one of her live shows because even though she's grateful and happy at how well she's suddenly doing, it's a lot and it's new and it is scary to navigate.
I just feel a little off today because I think that my career has just kind of gone really fast and it's really hard to keep up.
Like, it's nowhere near the same extent, but I remember the first time I had a video blow up and I went from like 400 people looking at my stuff to like 5,000. And even that feels like a lot of pressure because suddenly all these people are invested in you, and any misstep can feel like you're disappointing those who love and support your work. And make no mistake, you will misstep at some point. It's gonna happen because we're human. But the sad reality of this is that with any amount of notoriety, for every group of people who support you, there will be at least 1% who will pick apart and criticize everything you do. And even worse, those people also tend to be the ones who are the most invested and likely to take that investment to worrying lengths. Following a handful of incidents, including when Chappell disguised herself in order to have dinner with her parents, only for so-called fans to have been keeping tabs on her parents to track her down and interrupt their evening, Chappell has recently put out a statement that says the following: "For the past 10 years, I've been going non-stop to build my project, and it's come to the point that I need to draw lines and set boundaries. I want to be an artist for a very, very long time. I've been in too many non-consensual physical and social interactions, and I just need to lay it out and remind you, women don't owe you shit. I chose this career because I love music and art and honoring my inner child. I do not accept harassment of any kind because I chose this path, nor do I deserve it. When I'm on stage, when I'm performing, when I'm in drag, when I'm at a work event, when I'm doing press, I am at work. Any other circumstance, I am not in work mode. I am clocked out. I don't agree with the notion that I owe a mutual exchange of energy, time, or attention to people I do not know, do not trust, or who creep me out just because they're expressing admiration. Women do not owe you a reason why they don't want to be touched or talked to. This has nothing to do with the gratitude and love I feel for my community, for the people who respect my boundaries, and for the love I feel from every person who lifts me up and has stuck with me to help the project get to where it is now. I'm specifically talking about predatory behavior disguised as superfan behavior that has become normalized because of the way women who are well known have been treated in the past. Please do not assume you know a lot about someone's life, personality, and boundaries because you are familiar with them or their work online. If you're still asking, well, if you didn't want this to happen, then why did you choose a career where you knew you wouldn't be comfortable with the outcome of success? Understand this. I embrace the success of the project, the love I feel, and the gratitude I have. What I do not accept are creepy people being touched and being followed. This situation is similar to the idea that if a woman wears a short skirt and gets harassed or catcalled, she shouldn't have worn the short skirt in the first place. It is not the woman's duty to suck it up and take it. It is the harasser's duty to be a decent person, leave her alone, and respect that she can wear whatever she wants and still deserve peace in this world. I want to love my life, be outside, giggle with my friends, go to the movie theater, feel safe, and do all the things every single person deserves to do. Please stop touching me. Please stop being weird to my family and friends. Please stop assuming things about me. There is always more to the story. I am scared and tired, and please don't call me Kaylee. I feel more love than I ever have in my life. I feel the most unsafe I have ever felt in my life. There is a part of myself that I save just for my project and all of you. There is a part of myself that is just for me, and I don't want that taken away from me. Thank you for reading this. I appreciate your understanding and support. People have been searching up where her family members work, what her parents' names are, what they look like, and have actively stalked Chappell outside of her tours and meetups, referred to her with her actual name instead of her stage name, and have actively intruded upon her private time. And instead of trying to placate people with this, she has instead stood her ground and told people, hey, don't be weird, which is the correct response. And it perplexes me that people are mad about that. And oh, were people mad. And so this brings me to the core of my discussion today, the quite frankly deranged level of parasocial behaviour that is being exhibited by so-called fans of not only Chappell Roan, but of anyone who ends up being the unfortunate target of an individual's obsessions. The only reason this seems to be a bigger occurrence with famous people is obviously because of their fame and influence, but make no mistake, it's something that anyone can experience purely because someone else will find a singular or multiple traits to hyper-focus on to the point where the target is no longer viewed as a person anymore. They are a commodity, a means to an end for the instigator to attain whatever kind of goal they think participating in such behavior will achieve. If you followed a live band musician who works in a local club home, you would get arrested. So why would it be any different for Chappell Roan or any other big star out there? And people will no doubt say, just like Chappell said, well, it comes with being famous. That is no excuse. And saying that only perpetuates a messed up mentality that it's okay to stalk, harass, and potentially traumatize certain people in society, which, by the way, it isn't. Chappell's response to all of this, in my opinion, is pretty logical. No one wants to be stalked or touched without their consent, no matter what job they have and no matter how many people know them. But unfortunately, this is something that many people just have accepted as the norm. And because of that, it's kind of regarded as one of those things that everyone knows about but is never openly acknowledged. You know, kind of like the treatment of queer people before the 2000s or the attitudes towards periods. These are well-known things that we should really be more proactive about. But there are so many other people who are opposed to doing that because the subject is uncomfortable. But if we don't talk about it and call these behaviours out, nothing is going to change. And I think what upsets me most about this is that Chappell has had to step forth and become the prominent example of what happens when someone finally goes against the grain and says, enough is enough. Because of such a prevalent attitude towards the intrusion of fans within a celebrity's private life, when Chappell did call it out, the reaction was pretty divisive, to say the least. There were many supporters who understood where she was coming from, but there were also many people who berated her for supposedly making a big deal out of something that she signed up for, and even compared her doing this to the way that people like Lady Gaga discussed the invasion of her privacy in some interviews. And I think watching the reaction as it happened also really put a spotlight on something Chappell mentioned in her statement. This situation is similar to the idea that if a woman wears a short skirt and gets harassed or catcalled, she shouldn't have worn the short skirt in the first place. That comparison, in my opinion, should really put into perspective why the notion of stalking a celebrity shouldn't be normalized the way that it is, and why it is so important to fight against it. And it also highlights the fact that female celebrities experience this issue on a significantly larger scale than male ones. That's not to say men can't be the victims of this, they can, but I think several factors tend to make people less inclined to try their luck. Actually, thinking on it, that's not necessarily true. I think the difference here is the actual demographics that any given celebrity draws in. These demographics will absolutely have a hand in the kind of relationship that cultivates around that person, and this can include age, gender, geographical location, and other such factors. For example, more cases of parasocial relationships tend to happen in the USA, which may likely be a symptom of capitalism, where the tendency towards consumerism and ownership can often be interpreted as a form of loyalty or dedication to something. In places where this is a lesser concern, such as in Europe, fans often tend to be a bit more restrained, not by much, just a bit. Don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean there aren't crazy fans in every corner of the world, because there is. But I'd say probably per 1,000 people, I would say it's probably a significantly smaller percentage of crazy fans compared to places like the US and UK, where overconsumption as a form of devotion or status is encouraged. Saying that though, with the way that social media has encouraged this sense of global conformity in terms of people's habits, whether that be purchasing a luxury good or showing support to your favourite celebrities, it's not lost on me that there is every chance that fact could change within certain countries. We've already seen a major uptick in capitalistic tendencies in places like South Korea, for example, where, ironically enough, there is a major parasocial phenomenon that more or less controls the K-pop industry. K-pop could very well be its own video with how much weight it has with monetizing parasocial relationships between idols and fans. Idols are quite literally manufactured for projection to the point where contracts between idol and agency are dubbed as slave contracts. This can maintain expectations of diet, appearance, and even forbidding them from dating from anywhere between 3 and 7 years. One idol named Suli even experienced extreme abuse for openly dating another musician, as well as experiencing routine bullying online from apparent faceless male fans over things like her conduct and appearance. With that being the case, I'm honestly kind of glad that this new wave of Western celebrities and influencers are challenging previously uncontested notions like these, and that's no doubt been helped by the fact that many behaviours and social phenomena have become more scrutinised and talked about within digital spaces, which has allowed people to process them and apply these online discussions into a real-world space that allows actual change to be physically enacted. The term parasocial relationship wasn't even that common in the public lexicon until it became a buzzword on the internet, which can have its own pros and cons. But something as small as assigning a label or simply opening up a conversation and inviting people to talk about these things is honestly been proven to be one of the best methods to get people to actually evaluate their past and current behaviours. For example, a study was carried out at Portland State University by Raz Mostagimi regarding parasocial relationships in young women. Another way this self-awareness about parasocial relationships manifested was through participants' comparisons between themselves and others with parasocial relationships. I coded 2 main themes surrounding self-awareness and comparison, discussing extreme examples of more intense parasocial relationships and having a more intense parasocial relationship as a form of social capital. During the focus group, the participants began to discuss various examples of people taking extreme action on their parasocial relationships. JB and MM discussed the intense Twitter debates that people typically have on their Stan accounts. A Stan account, as the participants explained, is an alternate social media profile, separate from a personal account that is solely dedicated to one's parasocial relationship or fandom of choice. I feel like Stan accounts have kind of become the replacement for official fan clubs. Those still exist in some ways, but popularity has dropped off immensely, and it seems like we hardly see or hear any kind of mention of them anymore. Also, an interesting side note here. The origin of the term Stan is, ironically enough, from an Eminem song Stan released in the early 2000s. It centers around the perspective of an obsessed fan growing more and more bitter as he's seemingly ignored by his favorite performer, later on causing the death of himself and his girlfriend after going off the rails from not hearing from his favorite singer. The last verse is from the perspective of the singer, calling out the fan's entitlement over presumptions made about him, and how that entitlement does not endear him to that fan's attitude. It's off-putting and disturbing. Modern-day parasocialism can simplify the actions behind an artist. Many perceived slights may have complicated layers of industrial regulation, personal boundaries, or just not wanting to disclose private matters. Investment in fictional properties can lead to real-world people being attacked for things such as queerbaiting or not being queer enough to the point of forcibly being outed, such as in the case of the actor Kit Connor in Heartstopper or Becky Albertalli, the author of Simon vs. the Homo Sapien Agenda, aka Love Simon. I will say though, what I have noticed is that whenever a person of influence does call this behaviour out, because the message is directed at fans, this often leads to friction between dedicated fan bases, as they will often feel accused of doing wrong by someone they were led to believe they were showing unconditional love and support for, and we've actually seen this before. What didn't help matters in Chappel's case was that after uploading a few TikToks on the matter and putting out a statement online, she also had to cancel 2 of her live shows in Paris and Amsterdam in in favour of performing at the Video Music Awards, or VMAs, which also had fans questioning whether Chappell was, quote, changing after her rise to stardom. Unfortunately, I think this was just a really bad case of shitty timing on Chappell's part, but it's enough for people to get a foothold and go off about it, which in some ways I understand, because a lot of people were looking forward to those concerts. Some people were flying out specifically for them. Tickets cost a lot nowadays. But with that said, she actually gave significantly more notice than a lot of celebrities who cancel shows. She gave 2 whole days as opposed to a couple of hours when fans were already packed into the venue, which says a lot. Also, I'm going to look you directly in the computer screen for this. You would have to be a massive fool to not choose the VMAs. It's a pretty coveted award now and a very high profile event. Singing there is quite literally a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for some performers. But even with that, people obviously still weren't happy, and comparisons have been drawn to the way Doja Cat alienated her fans. I do find this particular comparison quite interesting, because Doja pretty much said the exact same things that Chappell did, but definitely in a very different way that was not as well received. It also probably doesn't help that her public image was further sullied by the allegations of her being actively involved in supremacist chat rooms, but hey. I also can't help but feel that race may have played a role in the negative reception of Doja's disdain for parasociality, but I don't really have the facilities to speak on that quite as much. Luckily for these two though, they at least felt able to call this stuff out and notice the warning signs before things became even worse. There are too many examples of a parasocial relationship not just making stars uncomfortable, but also putting them in physical danger and even cutting some lives short. I think probably the most well-known example across generations of this will be none other than John Lennon, the founder, co-lead vocalist, and rhythm guitarist for the Beatles. For anyone who doesn't know, the Beatles were pretty much the poster boys, quite literally, for celebrities who received an insane amount of attention from fans, which resulted in parasocial relationships. The phenomenon at the time being aptly dubbed Beatlemania. Unfortunately, at this time, the realistic threats to the band members hadn't been made apparent yet. The main people who experienced any severe degree of parasociality at this point in time were mainly Hollywood actors, and it was usually women. In the UK, this kind of thing was generally unheard of in the 60s and 70s, especially for musicians. I think the only other example could potentially be Elvis. This often led to the Beatles being pretty relaxed or even complacent with insistent fans. John Lennon in particular was apparently known to be pretty receptive to being stopped for an autograph by fans, and often did so pretty happily. In 1980, however, he signed an autograph for one fan in particular, Mark Chapman, who then proceeded to follow him out of the Dakota building where he was recording in New York and opened fire 5 times on John. John was sadly pronounced dead on arrival at the nearest hospital. According to Mark, he enjoyed the Beatles' music but became increasingly frustrated at the band's lavish lifestyle and brazen statements that they were supposedly more popular than Jesus. That's obviously a very streamlined synopsis of what actually took place, but there are plenty of articles and documentaries going into that in more detail. I don't really feel like getting into the super gory details in this. I think the subject is pretty heavy enough. Another example is in the case of Rebecca Schaeffer, an actress and model who sadly on July 18th, 1989 was murdered by an obsessed fan, Robert John Bardo. Bardo, who often sent her letters, shot her in her own home. He apparently felt betrayed and hurt after her performance in a love scene in Scenes from the Class Struggle. And even when looking at non-lethal situations, parasocial relationships where fans kind of go to these odd extremes of thinking they're more familiar with celebrities or otherwise can be seen across online spaces as well. A particular example I see people talking about sometimes is Jaden Animation and a creator called Nuxanol. Now, I'm going to be completely honest and say that this one confuses me because it doesn't appear that Jaden has ever acknowledged this person, and yet they make videos as if they and Jaden know each other on a personal level, and it honestly makes me think of how certain content farms that speak exclusively about topics to do with specific people are also just very parasocial in of themselves. It's not an immediate danger like other celebrity cases, but it's still really weird. All of this is to say that Chappell is not experiencing an isolated situation. She has every right to put these boundaries in place and be upset with people who breach them. We've had too many worst case scenarios of people who do that, and it has had disastrous consequences for those involved. It shouldn't have to get to the point where someone is martyred for people to stand up to it, and I'm glad that Chappell is doing that. Chappell is not a perfect person, but despite people's opinions on her recent actions and decisions, she is still a person who deserves respect. Her cancelling her tour for the VMAs may well have had the industrial pressure behind the decision, but because she herself is the figurehead, she's the one who takes the majority of the perceived slight. Work schedules change, it's just a part of her job. And, you know, this is something that is going to happen. Celebrities are going to change because fame does change people. Sudden attention does change people. But so long as they are able to navigate it in a way that is safe and in a way where they get proper guidance, it won't change their integrity. And from what I can see, Chappell seems to be maintaining that pretty well. I understand that these parasocial behaviours, for the most part, originate from a positive association. However, too much of anything will tip into extremes and cultivate a negative environment that can result in things like parasocial tendencies. It's the responsibility of individuals to temper their own expectations surrounding other people and understand that your devotion to this person who doesn't even know you is not all there is to life. If you do happen to harbour a certain level of admiration for celebrities, influencers, creators, or whoever, please just be respectful and try to maintain a healthy distance, not just for their sake, but for yours as well. There have been many instances where parasocial relationships have been used to take advantage of fans. Try to use official channels to interact with certain individuals in the ways that they allow you to, such as YouTube comment sections, social media, etc., and be understanding of boundaries and even help to keep them in place if you care about them that much. This can include not using real names, bringing up topics they've declined to talk about, snooping on their private lives, among other things. Also, on a similar note to that, try to unlearn the habit of referring to things like videos, artworks, and writing as content, and in tandem with that, try to avoid terminology that subconsciously causes actual people to be viewed as products. Don't worry, I also have this issue, I'm still working on it, and I'm a creator, so I should really be making an example. And above all else, do not place people on pedestals. We are all allowed to care about and be grateful to certain musicians, actors, artists, etc. for what they put out into the world, because it affects us in a certain way, it encourages us, it motivates us, it makes us happy, and that's great, but they should not be the center of your world. That should be you. Finally, to round this video off, I know it has covered some pretty heavy themes, and because of that, I wanted to bring your attention to the hard work being carried out by the Christina Grimmie Foundation, which was created following the death of a bright star, Christina Grimmie, who fell victim to a parasocial altercation. The foundation supports families who have been affected by the tragedy of gun violence and provides various services to help families who are encountering hardship so that they may focus their energy on healing. There are several ways to get involved, such as fundraisers and volunteering work, or even just spreading the name around, so please consider checking out their website. I will provide a link down below. With all of that said, thank you very, very much for watching, and I hope you found some value in what I talked about today. If you liked what I discussed or enjoyed watching me create the artwork, while watching and engaging with my videos helps immensely already, if you did want to support me further, then please consider joining my Patreon. Speaking of which, a big thank you to my YouTube peeps, Jessie Sparks, Manuel Lexom Gonzalez, Ash Valentine, Lauren R, Mystic Mind, and Pedantic Hat. And an extra special thank you to my indie production supporters, Morgan LaFay DeThin, Matty A, Kiyoshi, Roundcat, and Inside Chaos. If you'd like to consider becoming a patron yourself, the link to my page will be in the description. This topic was a pretty heavy one, so please take care of yourselves. I'm gonna go do some self-care because this... I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, but I'm like recording this at past 1 AM, trying to get it all done in time. So I'm gonna go sleep. Stay safe, everyone. That feels especially relevant after today, and I will speak to you all very soon. Bye!